So this might come as a surprise to you, but I'm Canadian? And yet somehow the majority of my audience isn't. Only 7.8% of you. What's up with that? Well, this just means I get the opportunity to educate you on some of our special little Canuck quirks. Because if there's one thing in this world that I find incredibly fascinating, it's the subtle differences between American and Canadian cultures. Like how our Smarties are kind of just knockoff M&Ms, while yours are just rockets, and Smarties as we have them don't exist for you at all. I remember when I first learned that and it blew my mind. Honestly, sometimes people still don't believe me when I tell them that, because how could Smarties not exist in the US? And how could Americans not use the term double-double to describe a coffee with 2 shots of cream and 2 scoops of sugar? Are we sure that Canada's the fake country? Because it kind of sounds like the US isn't real if you ask me. Now, as much as Canadians like to think that we're significantly better off than our American cousins, beyond candy branding and some terminology, we're really not that different. We both face the same social and political issues. Maybe in some far-off imaginary past, Canadian politics really were significantly more inclusive. I mean, it certainly does seem that our political system has become much more divisive and Americanized in my lifetime. But I'm also comparing it against memories from when I was a little kid, and I probably wasn't nearly as aware of the socio-political landscape I was living in. But anyways, despite all of our similarities, Canadian media rarely seems to make it stateside. Whether it be music, TV shows, or movies, it's rare for a Canadian artist to make it beyond the Great White North. And it's wild to me that people exist, millions, if not billions of them, who are unfamiliar with absolute classics like Bachman Turner Overdrive's Taking Care of Business, or Troopers Here for a Good Time, Not a Long Time. I mean, what do generic Tinder profiles even have as their bio then? Or does that phrase transcend the song? But anyway, today I just wanted to take a moment to talk about a few Canadian shows from my childhood, because honestly, I feel sorry for anyone who grew up without access to Canadian public television. Because what kind of childhood did you have if you grew up without the big comfy couch? Probably one where you didn't grow up thinking that dust bunnies were real animals. Not that I would think that would be ridiculous. But anyways, for those unfamiliar, the show follows Luna and Molly, a clown and her dolly on the big, comfy couch. Those are the opening lines of the theme song. And really, all that stuck with me from this show was the theme song. That and the clock-run stretch. This was a pretty early childhood show, so memories of it are fairly muddled. But it is amazing just how much resurfaces when I see clips from the show. Roly Poly Oly is another show from this point in my childhood with similarly muddled memories. Once again, all that I really remember is the theme song, which is a fantastic little tune. An absolute bop, if you will. The visuals also stuck in my mind, what with this being one of only a handful of computer animated shows from this era, along with shows like VeggieTales or JJ the Jet Plane, but neither of those are Canadian. So who even cares? I feel like Zaboomafoo needs a quick mention here. It's not fully Canadian, but the claymation sections were animated in Ontario. And it was a huge part of my childhood, and this is my video, so... sorry to interrupt, but before we move on from early childhood to normal childhood, it's time for a quick word from this video sponsor. Do you need cash? Are you tired of putting your passions and interests to the side to work all the time and yet still somehow only manage to barely break even at the end of each month? Well, that's where today's sponsor, Robin Banks Financial Services, comes in. With their simple one-step solution, you'll be back on top of your finances in no time. All you gotta do is rob a bank. It's fun, easy, and virtually risk-free. All you gotta do if you get caught is say that it was all just one big old silly joke. Hello? Who's this? It's the cops. They're saying that I need to clarify that this is all just a big old silly joke. I do not endorse robbing banks. That wink was also a joke. Or was it? Yes, it was. At the very least, if you get caught, do not cite me as inspiration because I did not inspire you. You acted under your own volition and I had nothing to do with it. Why would I take the blame for something I'm not even reaping any rewards from? Thank you. Back to the video. And now I want to mention Total Drama Island, which I know did kind of make it stateside, but I think it's still worth mentioning because for one, the show is really heavily Canadian. And there are regional differences, and the Canadian dub is objectively the better version because the characters are allowed to say frick. For whatever reason, Canadian Netflix only has the American version of the show. And the frick censorship honestly kind of ruins it for me. Let Owen say frick, goddammit! Another show that I want to mention, which I only just recently learnt was Canadian, and learning that was kind of what inspired this video, is Wayside. A show that, for whatever reason, always seemed to be having marathons on Teletoon when I was homesick from school. It wasn't my favorite show, but I'd learned to love it on those sick days. Really, all that bothered me was the differences between the show and the books, but the show by itself is honestly pretty solid. And it's been uploaded in its entirety by the original creators on YouTube, so that's pretty cool. I guess I know how I'll be spending my next sick day. Lastly, I figured I'd give a shout out to a more adult-oriented Canadian show, and that would be Mr. D. Honestly, this is a show that I've really enjoyed watching with other people, but have never really found myself choosing to watch on my own. It's a workplace comedy set in a school that I used to watch fairly regularly with my parents back in high school. It probably helped that my mom was a teacher. But it does feature the same actor who plays J-Rock in the Trailer Park Boys as the principal, so I think it's kind of worth watching for at least an episode or two just to see that. Anyways, there's plenty of other classic Canadian shows that I could talk about, but I just wanted this to be a brief look into some Canadian media from my childhood, so I hope you've enjoyed a quick glimpse into that. I know I didn't really go too in-depth with anything, but this was all kind of written in my head at work this morning and then manically filmed and edited tonight. So, yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna go out for a rip here, bud. Gonna go grab some Tims. You want any? And it's wild to me that people exist